these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office, experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all, in-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths. We hold these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back, folks. We have one of my favorite all-time guests and just mentors and great guy to talk to, great guy to gain insight from. And that is someone you probably know very well, Trey Gowdy. Trey Gowdy's with us today. Trey, thanks so much for being on.
You know, Dan, I was not sure who your guest was when I was listening to your introduction. I thought, who's I feel like I'm eavesdropping. He's getting ready to have a conversation with somebody.
It's this guy in sweatpants. We're at home today. We're also wearing sweatpants, so it's all right. No, Trey, we love having you on. I think this will be a popular one because it's always popular when you're on the show because you have a unique way of delivering insight, and you've done that recently through a new book, Start, Stay, or Leave: The Art of Decision Making. I like this because it sounds like it's kind of a self-help book, and I bet that'll do really well because self-help books tend to do really well, and because people are learning something from you, right? It's not just about politics. I'm sure it's about lessons that can be delivered to anybody's life. So I want to start on that. I want to start a conversation about that book, but can I just read a little bit about your bio just real quick, just so people are reminded of who Trey Gowdy is. He's many things, but he's first and foremost a former congressman, former prosecutor, in the state of South Carolina, the great state of South Carolina. Trey Gowdy is a #1 New York Times bestselling author of Doesn't Hurt to Ask and Unified with Senator Tim Scott. He hosts Sunday Night with Trey Gowdy on Fox News and the Trey Gowdy podcast. He spent 4 terms, right, as a congressman from South Carolina. Before that, federal prosecutor and district attorney in Spartanburg and Cherokee counties. His wife is Terry Dillard Gowdy, first grade school teacher in Spartanburg, South Carolina. That's a cool name, Spartanburg. Trey, great to have you and your expertise. We're going to talk about this book. We're going to talk about so some of your work in Congress that I think we've had you on before. Maybe we didn't really get to, especially on oversight, because oversight is going to be such a big deal in this new Congress. But what's this new book about?
Dan, it is about making, if you accept the premise that life in large part consists of the decisions that we make, where to live, what to major in. I mean, I'm obsessed with what people major in college. In fact, I've asked you what you majored in college. Because we only get one crack at doing something. Some things we get 100 cracks at. But how do we become really good decision makers, particularly since we only have one shot at this gift called life? And look, you're right. It's considered self-help. And if you want to shock every teacher I ever had, Dan, then first of all, tell them I read a book. That would shock them. And then say, actually, he wrote a couple too, and 2 were self-help books. They would be stunned. It's kind of split between mistakes that I made, good decisions that I made, the difference between remembrances and regret, and how to equip people to no matter, Dan, when I wrote this, I thought it's for people maybe your age, maybe a little bit younger. I've been stunned at the number of 70 and 80-year-old women and men who have emailed me or written me. And I guess it makes sense. The less of something you have, the more you value it. And when you get to be 80, you have less time than someone who is 40. So you really want to be a good steward of your time, and that involves making good decisions. So it's about how to own this gift you have called life.
And so part of doing that is developing a framework for decision making. And so if you had to explain to somebody, just generally how to think about the sort of the forks in the road that they face throughout life, what is that framework? Or is the book about kind of figuring out how to tailor a framework that suits you? Or do you think there's a sort of paradigm that we can all reference?
There are a bunch of paradigms. I mean, mine is what's the worst thing that can happen? That is how I evaluate decisions.
It's a good question to ask.
Well, I mean, I'm stunned at how many people don't think of what they're going to do if the business fails, or what they're going to do if they don't win their bid for office, or if the young woman does not accept your marriage proposal. I'm stunned at how few people think about that. Like, I went to college in Texas. I got a ton of fraternity brothers. Their paradigm for decision making was, hey, watch this. And it frequently did not turn out really well. But you need a paradigm, and you have to have self-awareness, which I also find, Dan, it's wrong to lie to other people. It's wrong. But I understand it. We want to present ourselves in the most favorable light. I do not understand lying to ourselves. So if we're not good at something, then why would we pursue, and you can't become good at it, then why would you pursue that? The other thing I'm big on is kind of what you see at the end. And I got to give you credit for something. And you probably have no idea I'm getting ready to say this, but I was reading an article about you. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. You attended a funeral on the West Coast. And there was an article written about it because there was a vote that was happening in Congress when you attended the funeral. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big fan of Dan Crenshaw. So I was kind of curious what your explanation was going to be. And it was beautiful and it was simple. What I did was more important. So I don't know who that, I assumed that it was someone you served with. I assumed that. I don't know who it was.
Yeah, it was.
So, all right, maybe his final picture of the last scene was people that he served with and respected coming to say goodbye to him. Thank you for your service. Goodbye. I think we will all do well to kind of figure, what do we want to be said and by whom when that final chapter is written.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I'll illuminate that particular example a little bit for people, because I took a lot of heat, because it was also right at the tail end of the very dramatic speaker's race, which I think we should talk about at some point during this conversation, but not now. And so tensions were high. And then we have our first votes of the week. I had a friend of mine. He was my old operations officer at the last command I was at, and he was a friend. And he's current SEAL Team 1's commanding officer, and he'd committed suicide just out of the blue. And so the funeral was when the funeral was. He can't change that. So, yeah, I struggled with the decision a little bit, because there is a duty to be there and vote. But there's this is a good example on decision making, since we're talking about decision making, because what's the worst that can happen? So what was the worst that could happen was our vote fails, right? Like, we don't have enough Republicans, because we do have a slim majority to get this vote across the finish line. That wasn't a very likely possibility, because these were fairly easy votes for Republicans to take. So I didn't think that was a big possibility. Number two, what if it did fail? What if that bill, I can't remember what it was, but I know that it's not going anywhere. I know that because we don't have a friendly Senate. So I can play this game out a little bit, and I know that my actions don't matter a whole lot, but who they matter a whole lot to is the family of my friend.
Yes.
And they made that pretty clear. I wasn't even sure I would see them, to be honest. It's just important for me to be there. And it gets to something you said, it was just, who's going to remember you and who cares about you? And, who are you doing this for? Whatever this is, who are you doing it for? And, as politicians, that the answer to that question is very broad. You're doing it for a lot of people, your constituents, for America. There's kind of these, and it can get very abstract, but for me personally, there's definitely a group that I do a lot of things for, or at least I want to make proud. And that's the SEAL teams, because they built me, they created me. That organization is extremely important to me. Those friendships are extremely important to me. As as well as I do, you can't trust a lot of people in politics,
right? And
so you've got to rely on your former life for people you trust. And the SEAL teams for me is that. I mean, these guys would never betray me, and I would never betray them, and I need to make that clear to them whenever I can. So, since you brought it up,
it was an absolutely beautiful thing for you to do, and you're right. It was a decision. You had to make a decision. And there may consequences is too strong of a word, but ramifications, no matter what you did. And so your decision-making paradigm, I think, was rooted in self-awareness, what's important to you. And you're right. The vote fails. God forbid, let's bring it up in 2 days. But you cannot go to a funeral in 2 days or 2 weeks.
Right.
And something that will not pass the Senate, and if it did pass the Senate, would not be signed into law. I thought it was a good life lesson in what's really important.
And
that's why it stuck out to me.
It's easy to lose sight of that. I mean, and the other thing you say is, okay, you got to have the end goal in mind. What do you say to people who aren't really sure what their end goals are? And I think that's a lot of Americans. It's a lot of young Americans, or they have highly unrealistic end goals. I hear from parents a lot that a lot of young kids, what do they want to be when they grow up? Influencers, whatever the heck that means. And it's not a realistic goal, for one. We were talking about podcasting earlier and how much work it takes to do a podcast. And, I do it because we have a big enough audience that it's worth the effort. And I actually love doing it. I learn something every time because I'm talking to guys like you. And it's just great. So I love it. But if I only got a few hundred or even a few thousand downloads, it would not be worth the effort. So how do you explain that to people in their decision-making process?
I would say this. There was probably a time in my life where I may have aspired to influence. I would aspire now to educate. I think that is a higher calling, to give people the tools to make up their own mind. I mean, influence is kind of a gift that we give people in our lives, but it's pretty hard earned. It's got to be, I think, a little more than downloading an app. I would hope. I mean, the people that influence you, Dan, I would hope that was a hard course that they had to walk to be able to speak into the decisions of your life. So, what I say to young people, speaking of apps, I like to liken it to a navigation device. If you do not know where you want to go, and it doesn't have to be like at the end where, 20-year-olds don't want to think about being 80. At the end of your college experience, at the end of this current job, at the end of this current relationship, if you don't know or have a sense of where you want it to go, then like putting in a destination into your navigation app, then you're going to be lost. I mean, you have no idea where you're going to be lost. Mm-hmm. The emotion can, kind of pick the music that we listen to while we're getting there. Logic has to drive the decision on where we're going. I like logic. And, I don't know, Dan, your folks may have said what my folks said, which is write a list of pros and cons. Okay, anybody in the world can do that. A rhesus monkey can do that. What's hard is knowing which fact outweighs another fact. Some of that's life experience. I mean, you could have 20 cons and 1 pro, but that pro is so probative and so material that it outweighs the 20 cons. And that's maturity and it's education. So, look,
and even deciding what that roadmap is and where you want to end up is a decision. It's actually the first decision, right? It's the first decision among many others that would be required to get to that end point. And people screw up that decision sometimes. It's not their fault. And how does somebody know when it's time to change? Right. I wrote about this in my book. And it's, you've got to be able to distinguish between quitting and logically changing directions. How do you give somebody advice on that?
I start with the self-awareness. What are the factors that are, I do actually start with defining terms. Is there a difference between failing and losing, or failing and not succeeding? Is a small profit succeeding even though it's not sustainable and you can't live off of it? So we got to define those terms a little bit. And then we have to be honest. And I'm big on self-awareness, Dan. Why is it not succeeding? Is it because I lack the gifts? Is it because I lack the capital? Is it because I lack the access? And, again, to the point of presenting ourselves in the most favorable light to others, I get that. It's human nature. But at some point, it's just you brushing your teeth in the mirror. So why was I unsuccessful when I ran for office 5 times? Why is my business? Why is this idea not taking hold? Am I 10 years too early or 10 years too late? I do see a difference between failing and losing. Every one of my heroes has lost, and they're all really well-known names. So I don't think they failed, but they lost. Defining the terms, knowing when to leave. Is it, the courtroom, Dan, began to impact my faith in a really not good way. I could not reconcile what the preacher was saying on Sunday mornings with what I was seeing. So it was time for me to go. I left trying to save that little bit of remnant of what I had left. Turned out I left too late anyway for that. Congress leaving that was not hard. I wasn't good at it and I didn't like it. When you are not good at it and you don't like it, you probably should not be doing it if you have alternatives.
I think a lot of people would disagree with you. Why do you think you're not good at it?
I didn't want to be good at it. I did not want to be good at what I saw the political environment, which is result oriented and not process oriented. The courtroom, we got this huge trial going on in South Carolina, this lawyer accused of killing his wife and son. How the prosecutor presents his case matters every bit as much as the result. You can't cheat. You can't hide the ball. You can't hide evidence. So in politics, someone wants to knock off Dan Crenshaw in a primary. They convince themselves that, yeah, I'm going to misrepresent his record. I'm going to say that he did this when he really did not do that. I'm going to send a tracker to follow him because the end justifies the means.
Right. Because I'm so much better and more qualified.
And then we convince ourselves the fate of mankind hangs upon whether or not I win this race. The fact that we have survived a civil war and a Great Depression and 2 world wars, that's irrelevant. We just can't survive Dan Crenshaw being in the House. So you convince yourself of that. And then what really messes up the culture is you begin, when you're treated unfairly, sometimes it causes you to recalibrate your own assessment of fairness and whether or not it really is a virtue. I just don't see a ton of fairness in politics. And you ask me what word I want people to use when I die, I want them to tell my wife he was funny and fair. So I can't be in an environment where I don't think it's rewarded.
So you're in the sense that you're not good at it. You mean you're not good at being a liar and a grifter, which
I didn't want to be good at it. I did not want to be good. And I probably, to be perfectly honest with you, Dan, would not have survived a primary challenge with some of the things that happened after I left. I think January 6th and the kicking out of the electors, I would not have survived a primary. Somebody would have run to the right and been successful.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, what you're saying is it's kind of depressing, but it's true. What does that say about the archetypes that we've built as a society about our politicians, as far as the ideal politician? And I bet if we did that kind of survey work, I bet if we asked the right questions, you still might build the right archetype, the honest and thoughtful politician. People say they want it, but it's not necessarily what they vote for. What they want isn't necessarily what ends up there. It does sometimes. There's a lot of good people in Congress, but it's not the people a lot of people think they are. It's almost always the opposite.
Echo that point, because I made this point a million times when I was sitting where you're sitting. There are 435 members. I'd be speaking to a group back home. How many can you name? Maybe 20, possibly 20. And the people you name are the people you see the most on television because they're the most animated about whatever's happening. But there are so many members of Congress, and this is wildly unpopular to say, but there are a ton of members that you would love to have as your next door neighbor. You'd love to have them coaching your kids in a sports program. I mean, they're good people. And that's wildly unpopular to say, and also wildly true. It's just, we kind of like say, well, the 10% I know must reflect all of it. And it doesn't.
It doesn't. And some people want that 10% to reflect all of it. Some people hate that 10% reflects all of it. Everybody wants different things. In the end, I tell people another truth they don't like to hear, which is the Congress probably represents the American people better than you would think.
Yes.
There's a lot of good people. There's a lot of bad people. There's some crazy people. There's some smart people. There's some dumb people. There's some well-informed people. There's some deeply uninformed people. It is a population. It's a representative of a larger population. It's very emotional. The Senate's a little less emotional, but it's unfortunately more and more getting to look more and more like the House. And it's understandable why the House is like that. I think the founders meant it to be like that. Elections every 2 years, the constant fray. It's a very majoritarian body. The majority rules very, very solidly in that, and the Senate's not supposed to be that way. And therefore there's a lot of emotion involved, and it is what it is. I'm not sure how to help people understand that. I mean, I try with this podcast, I try with messaging, giving people, I think, some insights into what's true and what isn't, like who has power and who doesn't. When they're just trying to gain your attention, when they're fighting for your attention versus fighting for your interests, and there's a difference. And it can make you pretty cynical. It can make good people leave. Like in your case, it seems that way.
You mentioned the word fight. I mean, what I really enjoy is Dan Crenshaw being lectured to on fighting. That's what I really, really enjoy. Is the word. I love it. I actually said this Sunday night. I mean, people say they want a fighter, but you don't have to go into politics. You can just go to a bar on a Friday night or an NFL football game and sit in the stands and watch a fight. I want a thinker who actually knows when to fight. And we hear the word fight more than any other word in politics. So my question is, what are you fighting for? What is that precept that is worth fighting for? And that's where it gets a little bit dicey these days.
And then what are the mechanics of the actual fight? Like what is the progress look like toward winning?
I think, probably for you, I did not serve with Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, but obviously she's very well known. And in conservative districts, she would be the person they point to. Mm-hmm. She was elected the exact same way that your favorite Republican was. So the issue you have is not with her, it is with her constituents. Mm-hmm. And if you want to change her constituents, you're going to have to persuade. And persuading is hard, Dan. People, they don't want to persuade. They want to ratify and validate, which is not hard. Persuading is hard.
Well, but you nailed it, though. That's the currency of fighting in politics, or at least it should be. It should be persuasion. If it's not, then I don't know what you're fighting for. Because if your goal isn't to get more people to agree with you who disagree with you currently, you're useless to me as a political ally. You're useless to me. You're making noise, right? Might be good at fighting for attention of the base who always agrees with you. That's fine, I guess. I mean, there's actually some space for political entertainment, but that's unfortunately become largely what our activism is entertainment for a very specific base that has zero desire to enlarge that base. That scares me because I actually care about the issues that we're fighting for. I thought we were supposed to. But if you don't, then why are you here?
Well, money is a big part of it. I think, fundraising is, I remember the first Q&A session I had in Congress that went, I don't like the word viral because I don't fully understand it, but that got picked up on YouTube and seen a lot. And I was shocked. I thought maybe 30 people would have. It was Kathleen Sebelius. I had some questions for her. And then, you begin to see, you can tell with some of the congressional hearings, who's there to make a difference or make a point and who's there to cut a video that is often used for fundraising. And,
what does that say about the system, though? Do you think there's a better way to do hearings? Because it's hard to get around that fact. One of the reasons I started the podcast was because we only got 5 minutes for that hearing, and it was televised. And it might be fact finding for me. Like I want to ask deeper questions, but there's no way I can get to those questions in 5 minutes, and they'll clam up because they're on TV anyway. And so I figured out that if I really wanted answers from witnesses, I had to just get them at a different meeting and actually talk to them.
Yes.
And so, and that's one of the reasons we started the podcast, and I'm glad we did. But in that moment, I'm guilty of what you just said. Like I'm looking to push that clip out, but I want to do it. And I also don't want it to be a disingenuous argument, right? And that's where you're walking the line. Can you be entertaining? Can you grab people's attention without alienating the people you're trying to convince? So that's always the fine line that I tell myself I'm trying to walk, and that I encourage others to walk. And I think you did. Maybe you weren't consciously thinking that way, but you certainly did it that way, right? Because you had tons of viral clips. Like, you say you're not good at this job, but you're very clearly good at it. And you were good at it while also, I think, maintaining your sense of self, And so maybe that should give us some optimism that was rewarded, right?
And then, you're only as good as your last perfect day. There comes a time when you when you don't pass someone else's purity test. And 99 is a failing grade. And I do write about that in the book. I did not expect my Democrat colleagues to treat me with tremendous fairness. Many of them did, but I didn't expect it. The media headwind was a little bit of a surprise for me. It was just so obvious in DC. The real surprise, Dan, was my own teammates. And, whether it's competition, whether it's they believe that a rising tide is bad because all ships are lifted. I don't know what it was, but some of the sharpest criticism, unwarranted criticism, plenty of the criticism was warranted, but unwarranted criticism came from my own alleged teammates.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's been the thing that surprises me the most too.
So to your point, the group that you trusted the very most was not in your current job. It was in the job you used to have. Mm-hmm. And y'all went through pain together. I mean, people cannot imagine what y'all had to go through to call yourselves budsmen, SEALs. They have no idea what y'all went through. I don't have, other than Zinke making me listen to him, I would not have any idea what it was. But there was something forged there. And I don't know. I just, we would go home in August. Town halls are tough enough in certain districts. And someone on our side of the aisle would plant the seed of something. So we're talking about internecine battles rather than talking about President Obama or the Democrats in the Senate.
What is it about conservatives? Conservatives have this problem more than Democrats do. It does exist over there, but it's newer to them. AOC and her ilk have really brought it into the Democrat Party. They'll actually go primary other Democrats. They do it less now, though. I think they've even kind of gotten the joke at this point and stopped doing it. But it's like a pastime for conservatives. Rhino hunting, and I mean, geez, some candidates make commercials about it. It's so well ingrained in the base's thinking, and I have some theories, psychological theories as to why that is. I'm curious why you think it manifests. Is it getting worse? Is it getting better? My time didn't overlap with your time. Is it the same? Is it just as bad? Or has it gotten worse?
At least for me, it was a desire for fame, that fame had become the ultimate political virtue, that what you could not necessarily achieve because of your legislative acumen or your ability to question a witness, you could achieve by going on a friendly television show and you make a lot of noise and a lot of news criticizing your own team.
Yeah.
Don't make that much news.
But why do conservatives, or why are they drawn to that? In a way that liberals are not. Liberals are not necessarily drawn to, Democrat on Democrat violence, right? But our team is very much drawn to that. And I always play this little thought experiment with constituents if we're talking about the subject. And I say, look, let me give you 3 headlines. You tell me which one you're going to click on. Number 1 headline, Pelosi has too much ice cream in her fridge. The second headline, AOC fumbles again, makes some silly comment. Number 3, 5 reasons why Dan is a globalist rhino. which one are you going to click on? You know damn well you're going to click on why Dan Crenshaw is a globalist rhino.
Yep.
Why is that? What makes you do that? And then what does it say about incentive structures? And then let's go back to the main topic here, the decision-making process that happens in politics with politicians because of these incentives that, as much as I'd like to fight them, they exist, and how does that create this kind of toxic political environment that we see?
Well, I think you are right that Democrats, I think, crave power. And if you look at it, President Obama got the Affordable Care Act and pretty much nothing else. He lost the majority. Nancy Pelosi lost the majority twice, and she's still revered. She is absolutely revered by Democrats and the DC media, even though she did something that Boehner and Ryan never did, which is lose the House twice. Yeah. And those guys are those guys are the butt end of jokes among Republicans.
Right.
So Rhino, Republican in name only. So I want to stop at the Republican. What does that mean? What does it even mean anymore? Is it classic doctrinaire conservatism or is it populism? Our founding fathers were not huge fans of populism, which is why you didn't even elect your senators back in the old days. And we have an electoral college. So I think the debate right now, because there is a lack of coalescing around a set of deeply held convictions, it leaves you free to fight with one another. They coalesce around bigger government. I mean, I think that is part of what progressives believe, that government provides the answer for almost everything. Conservatives used to believe in less, smaller, more individual, more state, more community, less federal. I mean, when I was there, Dan, there were movements to kind of federalize civil tort reform. There, even in the lead up to the Georgia Senate runoffs a couple of years ago, I think it was President Trump who said, you're not offering enough in COVID relief per American. We should offer more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the $2,000 checks thing. That was a really defining moment for me when I watched our side yell about we lost the Georgia Senate race because we wouldn't give people money.
Right.
I'm like, well, I stop at 2,000.
And I'm sitting there thinking, if you're a classic constitutional conservative, then you say there could have been a taking. Government could have taken your business, in which you are entitled to compensation, but everybody is not. So the hard work is figuring out who was impacted by a governmental decision and who was not. I didn't lose a thing in terms of income, Dan, so I deserve nothing. But until we can coalesce around what the R means, then the term rhino means nothing to me. I don't know. Republican in name only, according to whom?
Right. According to the most recent idiosyncratic litmus tests that the establishment decides is now warranted. Right. And now I use the term establishment with a different definition than most people do. Most people say establishment, they mean McCarthy, McConnell, and the leadership and the RNC and all that. And I'm like, oh, really? How much power does this establishment have? I'd love to know. Because the answer is very little. The true establishment is these other entities, podcasters, influencers, Twitter personalities, news personalities that honestly operate off of a completely different set of incentives than politicians do. People are like, "Oh, Dan, you just want to get reelected." Yeah. So let's unpack what that means. I want more than 50% of my district to still think that I am worthy of the job. That's not a bad incentive structure. I mean, you might say it's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than my incentive structure being, I need more viewers so I can get more ads and more money. And so I label that part of the establishment. And there's good people in that establishment. There's a lot of people I like in that establishment. There's others who I think are not in it for good reasons. But if there's a strong right-wing establishment, it's that, in my opinion, it's that. That's why I kind of define it as such.
I want to flesh that out for a second, because I think it is more that way now than even it was 4 years ago, 6 years ago. But even 6 years ago, I would ask the audience to honestly, I'd say, close your eyes. Even though there's a lawyer sitting beside you, close your eyes. Who are the 5 most important voices in what you consider to be the conservative movement or Republicanism? Be honest. The 5 most important voices. And I'd be shocked if a single one of them was an office holder. And I'd be doggone, I'm not far off. I mean, a lot of people I think now would probably put President Trump in their top 5. He's not currently an office holder, but the rest were media personalities. And look, I am living proof. I voted and now I talk about it. Talking about it is much easier. I was in a courtroom and now I commentate on courtroom. Talking about it is much easier.
Yeah.
If you got all the answers, go help. Go run.
What one of the things that frustrates me about people who do end up running, I think the toxicity that we talk about is very apparent to many good Americans, and as a result, they choose not to run. And it is what it is. Again, there's some good people, there's some bad people. There's a lot more good people than you think, but it's a lot of bad ones. One of the things that frustrates me is, I call it the sort of the town hall guy paradigm, right? At every town hall, there's somebody who gets up and they're mad about something and they have a complaint, and maybe that complaint is based in reality, maybe it isn't. It's not really important for the thought experiment we're about to do, but he's mad and he doesn't have the answers. He's just mad, and it's not his job to have the answers either. You're at a town hall; they're allowed to be mad. They voted for you to figure out how to think about that and how to find solutions. But what I see more and more and more is in Congress, instead of being the solution, people just get up and channel the angry town hall guy. And it'll be in private too. It'll be like in conference settings. It'll be behind closed doors. And I'm like, excuse me, are you just a random voter, or are you a member of Congress? You're supposed to be here to answer the questions, not just yell at us to find the solutions. It's time we actually do something about veteran suicide. Yeah, no shit. Like, no shit. Thank you for that. Like, what though? That's the hard part. Don't yell at everybody. What are you doing? If you're just going to be the angry town hall guy, don't come up here.
I am laughing only because towards not even towards the end, John Radcliffe would say the only way to get Gowdy to conference is if the speaker is going to make him present. He otherwise never goes to conference. I never went to conference. It's the same people making the same speeches, and they're not persuasive, and I don't know who you're talking to. I did away
exactly.
with town
Who are you
hall.
talking to?
Well, maybe whoever's got their phone open, letting a Politico reporter listen in on what's supposed to be. I mean, and that's another thing. You say it's confidential. You say it's private. Your word used to mean something. And we had members that had their phones open so reporters could listen in on it. And they convinced themselves that that's right, despite the fact that they gave their word otherwise. I had to stop town halls, because the way I look at it, Dan, you're gathering a crowd for someone who cannot gather a crowd. They're coming to hear you or ask you questions, and there's someone over there in a tinfoil hat dressed up like Samuel Adams that wants to take advantage of the fact that you have a room full of people.
Right.
So what I started doing is I have one-on-one meetings, and people are so different in a non-crowd setting. They may still have the questions. They may look, when I voted for Boehner for speaker, who by the way was the only candidate on the Republican side, but nonetheless, when I voted for him, I had a lot of people mad at me. So I sat down with them in April and we went through it. It's a more constructive conversation than like being in the Coliseum in a gladiator fight. I mean, the crowd it does something to people. So
it does.
You
know what a way to change that is too, is you do the exact same thing as a town hall. You just call it a meet and greet. And it automatically makes the entire situation different. I still have a public setting. I still take questions from the audience, but for the people who have legitimate, gripes with me or criticisms, they're surrounded by supporters, so they're more inclined to like ask the question like a normal human being, as opposed to in this sort of gotcha way, which just isn't constructive. You put me on defense, I'm either I'm going to do what I do, right? I'm either going to. It depends on what the question is, but we could be seeking truth, right, or explanations, and which would be constructive. And I've noticed that the way to do that is you just change the name of the event, and it still gets people there. Everyone's welcome, and but people are just nicer. It's a funny little trick.
The last town hall I had, I believe, I was in an argument with someone. You may or may not recall this. There were, I want to say, 20 some odd Christians that were beheaded on a beach in Libya. Do you remember that? Was that before your time?
It was before I was in Congress, but I know this happened. Yeah.
All right. And so we were talking about immigration, and I said I would find a way to help 21 Christians avoid being beheaded. I would. And if that makes me soft on immigration. But this person who claimed to be a Bible believing conservative would not. The 21 Libyans would just need to lose their head. That's just, I cannot have like a conversation with someone who I can't do it. So
yeah, the kind of the purity testing gets exhausting, and it's important for us to remind our own side that conservative. We had this question about what Republicanism is. I guess if we were to define it, it's supposed to be a vehicle for conservatism. I would argue it's the political party aspect. So its job is to raise money. Its job is to get good candidates elected, electable candidates elected, that are within some set of standards that is driven by conservatism, and because that which is generally understandable as a political philosophy where you lean on it. I think that would be a good way to frame what a Republican is supposed to be. Unfortunately, it's become loyalty tests, and whether to Trump or whether to some other like newfound standard that we kind of move the goalpost towards. And I've seen that over and over again. And people try to move to the right of each other, and they call each other rhinos one way. It's like, well, I have zero tolerance on the border, but then somebody else can say, well, I have zero tolerance for any immigration. We should just cut it all off, right? So does that make you more conservative? It make you more right wing, but it's not. There's a difference between being right wing and being conservative, and so conservatives have to do a better job sort of outlining what conservatism is, which is the political theory that Republicans are supposed to be the vehicle for. And it's a political theory that's based on process and problem solving. It's how we approach problems. And it's such an advantage over the left. If we could explain this to people properly, it is, because the left is just outcome oriented, right? It's like big government, big programs, big solution. They derive a sense of morality from having a larger amount of money dedicated to a bigger program that solves X, Y, and Z. Like the dollar sign, the number of dollar signs is truly it's a direct correlation between dollar signs and morality. But there's no problem solving that goes on there. There's no thought process. There's no questions asked. And it's like your book on decision making. There's a series of questions you might want to ask yourself, and conservatism's like that. Is this problem necessarily solved at this level? Should it even be solved by government? That's a conservative question asked. Liberals don't ask that question at all. They're like, oh, of course it is. Every problem is. Is this fiscally sustainable? Does this infringe on? Does this service that we want to provide here infringe on other people's rights here? Does it maintain the founding principles of life, liberty, and property, and inalienable rights and all that? Does it actually maintain that? Because if it doesn't, then we have to think twice about it. That's general conservatism. Liberals have no such framework to operate from, and yet we still can't convince people that we're a superior governing philosophy.
I like to boil it down to: is it a good idea? All right, it's a good idea for you and I to remember our spouses on their birthdays. It's a really good idea.
It's a good idea. Yeah.
It has absolutely nothing to do with federal government, nothing to do with state government, nothing to do with county government. So is it a good idea? And then we begin, and I like to start with like personal responsibility. I'm really big on that. And then, obligation to take care of people that are closest to you, your family, and then the smaller community, and then you move to the county, and then the state, and then you get to, and we have like a roadmap. I mean, we have an article in the Constitution that kind of gives us a sense of what the enumerated powers are. But I think that we have become populist. I really do. I think, okay, 50.1% of the people want it. Therefore, this is now what conservatism to me, Dan, tells people what they ought to hear, what they should hear. Populism tells them what they want to hear.
100%.
And you don't need me to do that. I mean, you don't need me. You can get like a really a well-trained monkey to do that.
Yeah, it's frightening. There's that strain for sure, and it's applied kind of that populism it's being applied in conservative circles sort of randomly. Ukraine is a kind of an easy topic to discuss on that front, but and mostly I think it's just reactionary. It's like, well, it's Biden's in charge, so we're against it. I mean, I'm not so sure that the thought process goes much deeper than that, because we all know damn well how Trump thought about this particular problem. And I think he would have done the exact same thing Biden did, probably better, probably more forthright, more aggressive. I mean, he said as much, at least in the early parts of the situation. He's kind of backed off on that recently, but not too much to give him credit for. And it's like, okay, just because you can take a poll and people are wishy-washy about this, well, they've thought about it for about 5 seconds. Okay, so you got to take that into account, because it is issue dependent. Some things people inherently understand. What's your views on abortion? People, I think, inherently have an understanding and an opinion on that particular issue, and they can think about it in terms of how many weeks you're due and all that. So there's restrictions, et cetera. But it gets disappointing when politicians start to repeat sort of casually, the comment they might have heard at a local diner. I just don't really care what happens in Ukraine. It's like, oh yeah, that's your political philosophy on a complex foreign policy matter. You just don't really care that much.
Which is why I like asking questions, because then I would kind of move across Europe and I would say, Poland, Germany, you stop me when you start to care. I mean, hopefully we're not to Great Britain or France yet before you start to care. I love questions. And, you ask about the 5 minutes in Congress, how to use it. 5 minutes is not long. Really, it's not even enough time to make one point. Mm-hmm. If I were emperor for a day, I would resign. But if y'all made me stay for the entire day, I would say you get an hour, Republicans and Dems, you get an hour. And everybody in Congress is not equally good at things. We're going to funnel our questions through a couple of our better questioners. And if someone gets their feelings hurt that they're not one of the better questioners, then get better at it.
That'd be better. I kind of love that, but yeah. Oh, it would never happen, but you're right. It would be a better way to do things, or at least let us argue with each other. And I haven't figured out how to construct that and not make it take literally all day. Because these hearings, even with just 5 minutes, very systematically done, it takes hours. If you're on a committee like Energy and Commerce, where we have, God knows how many members, 50, 60. But it'd be nice if we could respond. And maybe that's just the chairman being a good moderator. They have having that power. I don't know what it is, but it would make things more substantive. People I think are very disenchanted when they understand that we really don't have serious debates in Congress for a few reasons. I mean, oftentimes politicians have already made up their minds, like they're voting their district and that's it. So the room for debate is very slim, but there are issues where there could be room for debate and persuasion, where people are legitimately on the fence. But unfortunately, that's a little rare. And I think one of the duties we have as politicians is to at least find those places. Right. I'm trying to find it right now. I mean, look at the border issue. And, I've got legislation that really just focuses on the cartels. And my goal with Democrats is to say, look, this isn't a border bill. It's not an immigration bill. I know those are sticky subjects. I'd love to work with you on them, but I don't think you will. So what about the cartels? That's a national security threat. It can be outside the politics of the border and immigration. What about that? So far, I've been not very successful, but I'm hopeful still, and I'm not ready to lambaste them yet for not working with me. We'll see when we get back in session. But you got to find those little openings. Otherwise, I don't know what the point is.
Can I let my cynicism be in full flower?
Yeah, well, it hasn't been.
No, I've kept it in check out of my respect for you. I wonder. I draw a distinction between kind of line Republicans and Democrats and those in leadership. And I'll bet you there are some line Democrats who would say, you know what, Dan's got a good idea. But the higher ups would say, we need to take the House back. And the last thing we need is Dan Crenshaw getting a legislative victory. So, we're going to kind of refigure his district, try to take him out. Don't give him a victory. I just saw a lot of, and I think President Trump actually was shocked by this. I think he thought there were certain issues that he would be able to bring the other side with him on early on in his administration.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never asked him, but I think he was a little surprised. They're not going to give you a victory no matter what.
Doesn't matter if they agree with it. And he was great at doing this, at getting them to disagree with things they should have agreed with.
Right.
Unfortunately, the Democrats are good at doing it to us too. It's not quite as bad, but it's an unfortunate thing. And I'm like, guys, if we were just consistent, we'd win. I promise you that. We're very fortunate in the fact that conservatism is a framework of very consistent limiting principles. The Democrats actually don't have that playbook to operate from. So it's easy to find them in contradictions if you just look. And if you set it up right. And I think there's a lot of our leadership is decent actually at setting up those strategic pitfalls for the Democrats. They don't get enough credit for it, but I've watched it happen, and you need to let it happen. But oftentimes though, it's like, we're having arguments in the Republican conference right now. They're good arguments about what we should vote on. I can go take votes on the most conservative possible legislation. It doesn't hurt me. I'm fine with that. That's, as long as I believe in it. Right. But there's a lot of members who can't. And, the goal of being the majority is to make them take hard votes, not us, and so we're rightfully having those discussions, and there's been pushback, and we're kind of watching it play out. What do you think of our new majority? Let your cynicism fly if you want, or give us your opinion in the first couple months.
I have no objectivity when it comes to McCarthy. He was one of my closest friends when I was there, and I still talk to him on a really regular basis. I was watching it as a friend more than as a former member of Congress. I wanted to know, what is it that you want in the rules package that you're not getting? I was watching thinking, okay, what exactly is it? Really just one member can undo the speakership? 3 is too many. It has to be 1. To listen to some of Kevin's critics, they got a lot over the course of those couple of days. To listen to others, they got nothing that wasn't offered on the first day.
Yeah, which is the truth, by the way. The second one is the
which
truth.
I figured was the truth.
Yeah.
But because some people in conservative media thought it was really great that, 12 or 20. And here's the lesson for me too. And actually, I'll tell you who taught me this lesson. It was McCarthy. All 20 are not the same, Trey. They're not all motivated. You may have one that's motivated by something that's just a deeply held conviction, and we just disagree on it. Mm-hmm. And then there's 6 that aren't going to vote for me absent the audible voice of God, and probably not even then. So don't put the 20 in a monolith. And I think he was probably right about that. And what happened is you saw some of them come around.
Yeah.
My fear for y'all now is, in the courtroom, Dan, if you and I were prosecuting a case, we stand up an opening statement and we lower expectations. We're going to be fair. We're going to be honest. We're going to present to you everything. We don't make promises that we can't keep. We don't even make promises if we're not sure. Mm. Politics is, we're going to look at the Durham report. They're going to be indictments. They're going to be this. They're going to be that. And then at the end of it, it's a big disappointment. But it's a disappointment because you thought you were getting a bike for Christmas. You didn't think you were getting a dictionary. If I'd told you, hey, Dan, you're getting a dictionary for Christmas, it's a different level of disappointment. I just think we raise expectations I look at Comer and Jimmy Jordan, and I think they're going to be stopped at the grocery store just like Chaffetz was. why have you not put X in jail? Because we cannot put someone in jail. That's why.
Right. And stop making people believe that, for God's sakes. It's frustrating.
I would tell them that was my old job. I could do it in my old job. I can't do it in the legislative branch. But to call yourself like a constitutional devotee and not know that a legislator cannot imprison someone is incongruent to me. I mean, you have to know that's the executive branch.
It's more than incongruent, right? It's kind of infuriating because it just sets us back. It sets us back so hard, and because we end up fighting these silly battles again, fighting these sort of raised expectations, as you talk about, debunking them, infuriating people as you debunk them because they liked it when they heard it. Oh yeah, you're gonna get them. You're gonna get them. It's just become very much like us versus them. And they hear you can't get them. Oh, it's because you're just not a fighter. Just not a fighter. Okay, well, whatever that means. So I mean, what is then the kind of the proper role of oversight? You were chairman of the Oversight Committee from for 2017 to 2019. What advice would you give us on the proper way to do things?
Well, the most amount of oversight I did was on what happened in Libya in 2012. And I told people from the beginning, if I can tell the family members what happened for these 4 Americans who were killed, that is success. It then morphs into it has to be about Secretary Clinton.
Yeah.
So the notion that figuring out what happened to 4 Americans, including an ambassador, was not enough. It was not enough. It had to be also part of the 2016 presidential campaign. What I would, I oversight, look, I made 1,000 mistakes, Dan. I should have been quicker with subpoenas, and less, I say that it's not like you don't have, just because you're a chairman doesn't mean you don't have bosses. You still have people telling you what you can and can't do, or what they want you to do. So you also have to understand the media is going to view your investigations. They've never met a Republican investigation that should start or a Democrat one that should end. So you're not going to get the Washington Post or Politico. Having said that, so Jimmy, every time I had a chance to ask for somebody on a committee, I asked for Jordan. He is tenacious. He works hard. So Jimmy probably watched and certainly learned, be quicker on the draw with subpoenas. The Democrats certainly were with their January 6th. They didn't wait around for, we're not going to send a letter. We're not going to ask you. We're going to go with subpoena. So be quick with that. But also you have to level with people. We don't have the executive branch. So if somebody doesn't comply with a subpoena, you may be able to hold them in contempt of Congress, even though you have a slim majority. But you're not going to get a prosecution because that's done by the District of Columbia U.S. Attorney, who is a Biden appointee. So no one's going to jail for contempt of Congress. And you're still going to wind up not getting the witnesses and not getting the documents that you need. So it is education. It is illumination. It is not incarceration. And if you can sell that to people, and again, look, it requires patience. We don't have the White House. We have another crack at that in 2024. We don't have the Senate. We got another crack at that at 2024. For now, we have the House. Success is stopping bad things from happening. That is success, and illuminating fact patterns. That is not sexy, but that is success. And people may walk away and say, gosh, I thought we were going to get more than that. I'd rather disappoint you on the front end than build unrealistic expectations that cannot be met.
And, part of this, because I'll talk to some people who have wide-ranging talk show hosts or social media platforms, and maybe not explain this exact thing, but explain something that's going on. And they'll be like, oh, I didn't really know that. And I'm like, you didn't really know it, but you made very clear proclamations about it just 5 minutes ago. And you knew you didn't know. Well, I just want people to fight, man. We just want to get them out there and like that, we want people to kind of question the authority, right? And that's what gets to why they were maybe supporting the 20 against McCarthy, not really knowing what the 20 were even asking for. They don't care. They just, you know what? We got to shake things up. And I'm like, you got a responsibility, you have an audience, and it's okay not to know something. It's not okay to pretend you know something, have a strong opinion about it, knowing full well you don't know something. It's irresponsible. And I just, social media, the internet, the way things are in our media establishment, it just allows for that kind of nonsense. And so it's not even so much the members. I mean, sometimes it's the members, I guess, but it's often just the members are responding to this unstoppable incentive structure. And so, yeah, managing expectations is certainly part of it, and reminding people we're not judge, jury, and executioner, but we can illuminate things. But I mean, it's like you said, if somebody refuses to show up, they're not going to jail. I don't even think, if Democrats were in charge and January 6th committee, and I could be wrong, but they held people in contempt of Congress. I don't think any of them are in jail.
No, Bannon was convicted, but he also did not comply with a subpoena that was issued, if memory serves me, by Devin Nunes's Intelligence Committee. So, and that's the other thing that I would like to see every now and again, because I do think it's a kind of a core tenet of conservatism is consistency.
Yeah.
So when President Trump was nominated, I heard a lot of people say, I'm sorry, your candidate didn't prevail, but you have to support the nominee. And we weren't talking to me. They were just talking in general. Mm-hmm. But somehow that analysis does not carry over to a speaker's race.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I don't know why it doesn't, but it certainly did not.
But it doesn't. And people hate the filibuster in the Senate. They hate that you got to get 60%, that 40 can block the will. But they don't mind that 20 House members can block the will. So to me, consistency is part of conservatism. And the consistency really is, whatever is most popular at that particular.
Right. It's short-term thinking versus long-term thinking. And I do think a tenet of conservatism is, does this make us feel good in the short term, or does it help us in the long term? And if the answer is the former, then you're probably not going down the right path. And people shouldn't support you. And my goal in doing this podcast, talking to guys like you, is just illuminating that for voters, and hoping that voters can then see the telltale signs that are very easy for you and me to see. I can tell very quickly when a politician is full of crap on the campaign trail. Just reading from the list of red meat items that their consultant told them to say, not an original thought to be found anywhere. You can predict exactly what they're going to do and say just based on the situation, because it's like they're reading from a manual. And I bet it's not always obvious to everybody, because most people they're not political junkies. I mean, they might think they are, but they're not. And they're living their life, and they're using heuristics, shorthand heuristics to make a decision quickly on somebody, to judge a candidate quickly, and maybe trusting people that they tend to like on TV or media, or maybe local party members, or whoever it is, local influencers. And then they make the decision they make without seeing that it might not be the best one.
But we still have to ask questions, even of our friends. And that's what I mean, asking questions. I'll give you a perfect example. In the last couple of days, someone that I like, she's been great to me since the moment I met her, our former governor, Nikki Haley, when she announced she either insinuated or said competency tests for people over the age of 75. Do you see that?
Yeah. Are you over 75? Did that offend you?
You know what my first question was? My first question was, I asked my wife, am I over 75? Because I can't remember how old I am. But you know what I thought? I thought, okay, if you can't be the leader over the age of 75, because unless you take a competency test, then why should you vote on who the leader is if you're over 75 and haven't taken a competency test? That would be my question.
That's an easy logical step to take. And so do you think she put herself it's a risky move, that line of reasoning, and she's going to have to keep using it? Do you think it was too much of a risk? It is not
risky unless you're asked about it. It is not risky. It is not risky to say red states and blue states should divorce one another. unless you are asked, where does Georgia go? Because you got 2 Democrat senators and a Republican governor.
Yeah,
Hypothetically,
Hypothetically,
where does Georgia go? So it is the power of the follow-up. In the old days, I would like to think that we would have these conversations in private among, teammates. Hey, before we go out and say that, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? But there's no such thing as a confidential conversation in Washington anymore. Certainly, I mean, it wasn't when I was there. And we have a tendency to ask really, really tough questions of people that we don't agree with. And we don't ask that many questions of people that are on our side.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're right, then you ought to be able to withstand a little bit of cross-examination, shouldn't you?
Yeah, you would think. And I do think that'll make its way out, as the campaign goes. I mean, I didn't even think of that follow-on question. I thought it was risky. I wasn't sure why. I don't think I put too much thought into it. As I'm just sort of taking a step back and watching as this primary unfolds. I think it's going to be interesting. That's for sure.
Well, and there may be an explanation, but I was just sitting there because I'm retired and have a lot more free time than you do. And I'm just sitting there thinking, okay, if you can't lead over the age, then why would you pick the leader over a certain age without a
right.
And furthermore, Dan, I don't know what you mean by competency. Do you mean like I've studied the issues, or do you mean I know what today is? What does that mean? Who gets to decide what competency means?
Right. Is there an established competency test that I'm currently unaware of?
In court, it is, do you know the difference between right and wrong? That is the competency standard in court.
How do you even establish that? So what's right and wrong?
Well, you can't prosecute someone that cannot, like, if you kill someone and you hop on top of your car and tell everyone you're Jesus, you are probably incompetent if you really believe it, and not incompetent if you're doing it just to avoid prosecution.
Sure.
So they give you tests to figure out, do you really not know the difference between right? I had a woman pull a gun on me when I was in Congress outside of church, which will teach me to ever get up and leave an NFL football game in the afternoon to go pick my kids up from church. I'm going to send my wife from now on because a lady pulled a gun on me. She was incompetent. She made significant mental health issues, did not know the difference between right and wrong. So she's not prosecuted.
Yeah, should she be? This might be another question. She shouldn't run for office, I guess, which is maybe Nikki Haley's point. But she's obviously not.
But
she
should
doesn't
she
mean that.
Vote for someone who's going to hold office?
Right. And that's a scary thought. Well, I mean, the left is I think it's the right that brings up this topic of, should we have at least knowledge tests, political knowledge tests? Now, again, how you format that's a whole can of worms. But before you even vote. And on the right, you're going to get more support for that, I think, generally. On the left, it's voter suppression, right? They want voting to be as easy as ordering a drive-through cheeseburger at McDonald's, maybe even easier than that. And, they would argue you shouldn't even have to drive to McDonald's. It would just be on your app, and maybe your sister could actually fill in the app for you. I mean, they want it to be so absurdly easy that it's literally easier than anything else you've ever done in your entire life. And you're like, at a certain point, you're like, okay, come on. Should it be? I mean, just forget about how practical it is and how much room for fraud there is, because there's obviously that concern. I mean, just philosophically, should it be easy, or should it mean something? Because I struggle to find one great thing in someone's life that was achieved easily. Success in a profound way is never achieved easily. And so if voting is an inherent right of our democracy, and it's so important, then should it be as easy as ordering a cheeseburger? Probably not. But how hard should it be? That's a difficult question too. It should at least be so hard that that's very difficult to commit fraud. That it should at least be that hard. But maybe it should even be harder. Maybe you should actually know things. I don't know. That's a hard question, and because it's such a hard question, we probably won't ever get an answer to it, and we'll just maintain the standards we have. But it's an interesting
Although
thing to think about.
I think Republicans would be wise. I think I heard a candidate the other day suggest go back to only day of in-person voting. And
Yeah.
And I think in some ways that may signal to people the only way we can win is if we have a restricted field of voters. And even if you really believe that, I don't think that should be what the message you send out. I think the message you send out should be our ideas are so good, we're going to win unless you cheat.
Right.
So how do we connect the restriction to reliability? I don't care if you have 2 weeks to vote leading up to election day and you show an ID. I don't care. You can have 2 weeks. What I don't want is we're 2 months afterwards and we still don't have a winner declared.
Yeah, that should be easy. It should be like Texas and Florida. Texas and Florida have, for big, large states, we do it okay. And I go through the process. I find it difficult to cheat in Texas. I'm not sure. And I'm a pretty creative guy. I could probably figure something out, but it's hard. And that makes me feel good that it's hard. And I like that. You know, I guess because I agree with you. I think 2 weeks is about right, but why not 3 weeks? And then why not 4 weeks? And then why not 5 weeks? You know, and at a certain point, like when is election day? Because if you move, if early voting literally means election day is not November 6th, it's, you know, whatever, it's October 15th. And so that's the honest argument against early voting. But, you know, I think there's a middle ground there. I think we have like 10, I think we have about 2 weeks in Texas. It ends up being 2 weeks. And it is helpful, obviously, you know, to get there when you want to get there. But you are literally moving the voting day back. And it's like, okay, how far can this really go? It shouldn't go too far back. And that's an honest debate to have, you know, I think. I know I'm keeping you probably past the time I said I would keep you. But I did have one question, if you don't mind going back to Congress for a minute, because you wrote about this in your book, the chaos of overthrowing Speaker Boehner. And that, you know, how do you make decisions going into that, right? There's this like uprising from our right wing because, you know, it's the anti-establishment. It's, you know, maybe I'm being cynical, but I think it's often not much more complicated than like, I just don't like him because he's in charge. Like, I think it's honestly that, you know, I don't like the Ukraine war because Biden's in favor of it. And, okay, geez, because everybody's on the thing. And so I won't be for the thing. Was it those incentives coming about, or was there things that Boehner did that were legitimately, you know, he could be criticized for? What was your thought process through all that?
I can't remember what alleged acts of apostasy Boehner committed. Now, keep in mind, he struggled to get the votes that January. I actually got more grief, Dan, for a vote I didn't cast than any vote I did cast. My plane was delayed due to snow. And Boehner was calling me, and his office was calling me saying, are you going to make the vote? Or are you going to make the vote? That's never a good sign if you're calling individual members to see if they're going to make the vote.
And you had a pretty big majority.
I think he lost maybe 18, 20 votes, something like that.
Wow.
So he said, will you put out a statement that if you were here, you would vote for me? And I said, yeah, Speaker, I mean, you were the nominee. Nobody else ran against you in November. You are the nominee. God, that was terrible. So that, you know, that's January. And then I guess we're in July when McCarthy calls me and says there's going to be a motion filed to vacate the chair or get rid of the speaker. And I said, for what? I mean, what did he do? I didn't go to conference, so I don't know what he did. Near as I can tell, Dan, because it happened earlier, you know, right before August, and just so people know, we go home for a month in August, and that's when people have their town halls. So what do you want to be talking about in the town hall? And what do you want to be fundraising over? So one summer it was, we are going to rip Obamacare out, root, stem, and something, which was tantamount to saying President Obama is going to sign the repeal of his signature piece of legislation.
Yeah.
So I mean, you think about it, that is literally, I know they say never use the word never. It is never going to happen. But yet you convince people, if only you give $25, if only your member fought hard enough. So every summer, instead of talking about the other team, we had to go into town halls or constituent meetings or meet and greets talking about something on our side.
Mm-hmm.
So I told Kevin, I am going to announce I'm not running again. I got so much flack for voting for Boehner last time. I'm not putting my family through it again. I'm just not going to do it. I don't know how he avoided the vote. He called me later that afternoon and said, we're not going to actually have the vote. I think Boehner, if he were on here with you, Dan, he would say he thought he would win overwhelmingly. And the whip count maybe was closer than what he, I mean, you know, John Ratcliffe, I think, had the highest conservative rating of any, according to the outside groups, of anyone I served with. He was a Texas congressman, director of national intelligence. He will tell you the most controversial vote he ever cast was voting for the Republican nominee for speaker. I mean, so I'm sitting there thinking, this guy literally scored 100 on your conservative test. And yet his act of apostasy was voting for the nominee. I just wasn't going to do it again. And somehow or another, Kevin avoided the vote. And then the Pope came, and Boehner, of course, devoutly Catholic, and he resigned shortly thereafter. And then, you know, they didn't like Kevin. Don't know why, but they didn't like Kevin. And we didn't have anybody that was going to be speaker. Paul Ryan had zero interest in being the speaker and literally had to be talked into it. And I know that for a fact because I was one of the guys sitting there trying to talk him into it. There was no one to run, no one that would have, that the Freedom Caucus and the, you know, Tuesday group or whatever the different groups, factions are within the party, no one that they could coalesce around other than Paul Ryan. And, you know, what took a couple of months before they didn't like him either.
It's not surprising, I guess, that not that many people wanted to do it. You see this takedown for almost no reason. And then every member is making decisions based off flack that they'll take. I mean, you're saying as much. It's not so much about the objectivity of the issue at hand. And that's frustrating. I mean, you see it in random bills all the time, and new members especially have this problem. They're like, oh my God, why is ever, because you'll see this uprising from our own side, by the way. It's always from our own side, this like internal uprising against a bill that passed out of committee unanimously. There's no problems with it. The best example of this that caused the most stir was about a year and a half ago at this point, with the, no, I guess exactly a year ago, just over a year ago. Doesn't matter. HR 550. This was supposedly the federal vaccine database that was created, and all these terrible Republicans voted for it. It was not true at all. I mean, if you read it without understanding the legal language there, and without understanding what exists and what already doesn't exist, I can see how you might interpret it maybe as creating a new database. It did no such thing. It in fact did more things that Republicans would like than Democrats would like. It put restrictions on any federal government ability to even gain insight into existing databases. But it becomes this wild thing, and people who know better will just vote against it, just out of, I don't want to deal with it. Don't want to deal with it back home. Don't care if it's the right thing to do, because it's too hard to go explain things to your constituents. And
I remember Tim Scott voted. There was a trade bill, TPA.
Mm-hmm.
And so he voted to allow the public to read the bill. That was the vote, to allow it to be read, because you could only read it in not a skiff, but it wasn't public. And so he voted for it to be publicly available, which you would think would be like, what's the harm in like reading that publicly? Oh my heavens. It was one world government. It was a worldwide gun grab. It was it was. I remember doing a tele town hall with him, and all of the questions were about like one world government and, you know, one world immigration. And look, there are 1,000 reasons to maybe not like the trade agreement. We're not voting on the trade agreement. We're voting on whether or not you can read it. It just, yeah.
And
I'm
in
so
hindsight,
glad we talked, because whatever like seconds I spend missing being there, this has cured that. So I cannot thank you enough.
What are you talking about? It's great. Everything's great. You just got to do it. We need good people. you know, we need you back. We need good, smart people to run and be part of the solution, as frustrating as it can be. And God, we've got to help people understand things. God, that one world government stuff. God, I hear about it all the time because like the World Economic Forum added me like years ago to this random part of their website where it's like young and up and coming leaders. It's like a Forbes 30 under 30 type thing. There's no like interaction between me and them. They're just going to add people to the list. And next thing you know, it's like, you're Klaus Schwab's illegitimate son. I know it. And like you've been trained, you're a Manchurian candidate. And it's like, you want one world government. I'm like, I don't even think they want one world government. They might. I mean, it's basically just the world talking about World Economic Forum. They're basically a bunch of progressives. I get it. We disagree with them. Why do you think that there's like they're so influential? I've never actually understood that part of it. Like, why does it take up so much space in your head? They're a random group. Yes, they're Democrats, they're progressives. Yeah, I mean, worry about the Democrat Party here in America. Worry about them.
You mean there are people in Houston, Texas, worried about Democrats that aren't in Houston, Texas? I mean, aren't there enough in Houston to worry about?
Exactly.
Hey,
They're in elected office.
I got a question for you. How much insulation, if any, does your service afford you?
Well, zero now. I mean, you see kind of the nasty things Tucker says right after our interview, actually on Fox. This was some months ago at this point, but because I made the perfectly rational arguments. You asked me, why do people vote for or against Ukraine aid? Remember this infamous this interview you and I did on Sunday night. I said, well, there's good arguments and bad arguments for it. The good arguments, or I guess the acceptable arguments, are okay, it's too much money. Does it need to be that much money? What is it being spent on, et cetera? There's honest questions to ask there. Will it provoke Russia, et cetera? Now, those aren't really good questions. I think the answer's been non-clear at that point, but there's still decent questions to be asking. And then I said there's dumb questions to be asking, or there's foolish arguments to make that are basically pro-Russian arguments. And a lot of people make those arguments. And I guess some people are very, very insecure about their position, because who lashed out at me the next night? I didn't even mention him, of course, but Tucker did. And it came up with the infamous eye patch McCain. So no, our side, the left long did away with any respect for service or sacrifice, but the right has too. It's been pretty obvious. I mean, in politics, everything is on. There's nobody's insulated from anything. It's gotten really, really bad. Obviously, the right was just indignant that Pete Davidson would make fun of me using my war injury. In hindsight, that was very mild compared to how Tucker did it. But it's okay. It's okay now because we disagree, and if we disagree, then he's less than human. And that's the new standard, unfortunately, and kind of in the political entertainment industry. Let's call it that. I think I'm gonna use my words very specifically. It is the political entertainment industry, where all bets are off.
Well, I know you got to go, and my probation officer is saying I'm late to check in, but because I do value your opinion on all matters involving the military. It is one thing to me to say, okay, I've weighed and balanced it, and Ukraine falling is not like, terrible to the United States. Okay. I disagree with you, but okay. But there is this like hostility towards Ukraine in some circles.
It's weird. It is weird.
Like when Zelensky spoke to the joint session of Congress, and someone said he was dressed like the owner of a strip club. I remember thinking to myself, I'm very, very happy. And I called my mom and said, I have no idea what they dress like. So I would not know what the owner of a strip club dressed like. So I got to take your word for that. But then I'm sitting here thinking, well, Putin's riding around shirtless on a horse. So would you rather have the guy that owns the club or the guy that's dancing in the club? I never, like, the hostility towards them is what I don't really fully understand, I guess.
I don't either. I've analyzed this again psychologically as best as I can. And I think it really comes down to, I'm not going to be for the thing. I'm going to make fun of whatever the thing is right now. If everybody agrees with it, I'm the smart guy who disagrees with it. And what I tell people is being a contrarian doesn't necessarily make you smart. Like, there's a few contrarians in history that have proven to be exceptionally smart and revolutionary. right? Elon Musk and, Edison and these great names. You ain't one of them. Like you're probably, the chances of you being one of them, it ain't high. All right. You're just shit talking at this point. And for what purpose? Like, what are you gaining? What are you delivering to the public here by just being a troll? And again, there's good arguments and there's bad arguments. I stand by that comment. There's definitely some very, very bad arguments. And just we don't like the way he dresses, or he dressed up as a lady once because it was part of a comedic skit. That really? So okay, so genocide is okay now? Like, what the hell? It's mind blowing. I don't get that it's ultra cynicism. And you know where I've always heard it from? Far left professors who teach like history and foreign policy. I mean, I remember them at Harvard. I remember them at Tufts. It's like everything America does is bad. Every foreign policy decision America has ever done is bad. We should be chastised for it. We shouldn't do anything. We suck. That's very much a left-wing argument. And by the way, you know where it came from? Soviet Union propaganda. If you don't like woke crap, thank the Soviets. They implanted it in the brains of 60s radicals who became professors and took over the institutions. They marched through them. And the woke problems you have now can be directly traced back to Soviet propaganda and intelligence operations that did a fantastic job at what they at delivering it into the American mind, because we have a free society and it's not hard. It's easy to manipulate us. It's even easier with social media. And this is well known too. I mean, now it's well known. Like I think the stat was something like 85% of their budget went to information operations, not the cool sneaky peeky spy stuff like in The Americans, that show where you've got Russian agents in America and they're recruiting, government officials. That's legit spy stuff. It did happen, but it was a small part of their operation because that stuff's really hard. First of all, it's very hard in our country. It's very hard in their country. Information operations was their specialty. Manipulation, propaganda. They're very, very good at it. They're very astute. And so, to pretend they're not an adversary and haven't been for God knows how many years at this point, it's like whistling past the graveyard. It's naive, and it's dangerously naive. Frustrating to see. And that's a different subject, I guess. And you've got to go. Trey, this has been great. And your insight is always welcome on this podcast. I always really enjoy talking to you. I don't even know where the conversation is going to go. Sometimes it just goes. And I love that. So thank you very much.
Can I say something before we leave?
No, we're out of time. Sorry. Goodbye.
I'm
just kidding. Of course, go.
I don't care if I'm a minority of one. I don't care. I am grateful for your service. And I close my podcast with Seth Moulton the same way. Who, for folks who don't know, is a Democrat. I respect what you guys went through and still go through, and I just would never belittle. I would never do it. So I'm grateful for your service to our country in every way that it's manifested itself.
Well, thanks, Trey. And it's also important to note that disrespect, it's still in the sections of the political entertainment industry that aren't real life. I still have about approximately only 2 to 3 bad interactions in public, and it wasn't like, and they made a point of finding me. They were planned ahead of time. So there are 0 moments in my life, and political life anyway, where you meet someone and they're just chastising you. It's happened 0 times. Because Twitter is not real life. Regular people are real life, and they're good. They're generally good. Yes. Like it's just, they're reasonable, good people that understand what they know and what they don't know, and just want to live their lives and hope that their politicians aren't being complete maniacs. And so we got to try and deliver that to them. We got to represent them, because they ain't on Twitter. They're just not. I don't know why they would be. So
yeah, well said. I love talking to you. I hate that we didn't have a chance to serve together, but not enough to go back and do it again.
Yeah. So, yeah. Hey, never say never, Trey. All right.
You take care of yourself.
Good to see you, Trey.
All right.
Appreciate you very much. Thank you.